Off season. We're on location today at Channel 17 in Yarmouth, Massachusetts, and we are making paella, famous Spanish rice dish, and it was actually out of one of the very first ethnic cookbooks I ever bought. So we'll be right back. So, here's our paella pan. As it happens, yesterday was Talk Like a Pirate Day, so I went into All Cape Cook Supply in Hyannis, and I asked for this, and I said, you know, if I can't ply the Spanish main, I'll get a Spanish pan. It's my dumb joke for the day. So, paella originally comes from the region of Valencia, which is in eastern Spain, between Murcia on the south and Catalonia on the north. And it's a big rice growing area. Valencian rice is actually fairly famous. They have their own varieties like Calaspara and Bomba. And paella is the recipe that shows it off the best of all of them. Now, we are starting with something that's a constant in almost any Hispanic cuisine around the world, called a sofrito, which means roughly slowly fried. In Catalan, the language they speak in Valencia and Catalonia, it's also called a sofregit. And what it is essentially just onions and tomatoes, and in some countries they add peppers and such to it. But the Catalans tend to like it a little simpler. So we've just got one onion here, finely chopped. Pick up the remnants. Follow along with me here, folks. You didn't see that. Got a few tomatoes here. I usually like plum tomatoes, but lately I've been using these Campari tomatoes. They're just tasty. And I've got about 5 of them. Probably want 2 or 3 plum tomatoes or 1 or 2 bigger tomatoes. Just chop them up. If you're less lazy than me, you can skin them as well. That just involves cooking them briefly in some hot water. Skin should slide right off as the layer immediately under it cooks. Now, as you can see, we're going to do this on the grill, and there's a reason for that. Paella is traditionally an outdoors dish, made on an open fire, the big pan. Actually, one of the interesting things I've seen, I actually first started making this when I was in high school, and I used to make it with my grandfather, who was probably the person most responsible for me being inspired to cook in the first place. And he was Polish, so this recipe was new to him too. But we used to make it in an electric frying pan. And in fact, this is actually the second paella pan I've owned. I used to have another one, but I don't know what's happened to it. You don't need a paella pan. They're not expensive, but they are similar to woks or cast iron. As I said, this is brand new, but as you can see, I've seasoned it. If you use cast iron, you know what this means. You brush it down, you heat it up, and you brush it down with oil, and you try to form a coating on there. Basically a non-stick coating. That protects it from rust and also keeps food from sticking to it. Carbon steel pan isn't that expensive. If you buy one, you can use it for a bunch of different things. Basically any fried dish that would benefit from being shown in the pan. Also, if you're frying something up at a cookout, like fried chicken or something like that, you could use it as a deep dish pizza pan. Let me just put these aside. I'll snack on these later. Now, as you can see, our coals are almost ready. Now remember, when you're dealing with a chimney lighter like this, and this, by the way, is the Weber chimney lighter, the one that Cooks Illustrated seems to like best. Always wear gloves because it'll always be hotter than you think it is. Now, I'm going to put this down on this drain cover. And we're going to start heating this up. We're going to give this a couple minutes to preheat, and in the meantime, we're going to cut up our chicken. This is just boneless chicken chunks. Looks like a mixture of thighs and breasts. Traditionally, in Valencia, they use both chicken and rabbit. Rabbit obviously is not the easiest thing to find around here, unless, of course, you're willing to go catch that one that you see running around the backyard every once in a while. We're going to cut it into chunks. I've got about a kilogram of chicken here. It's about 2 pounds if you don't have a metric scale at home. Incidentally, if you've seen my baguette show, you know I recommend doing metric measurements for certain recipes, if for no other reason than you might have to share it with someone outside the US. Now, you may be wondering, isn't this supposed to have shrimp or lobster or monkfish or any kind of seafood in it? Well, you can do that. But the traditional Paella Valenciana comes from the inland areas where they have all the rice paddies in Spain. And so they use land animals. Rabbit, chicken. A lot of recipes you will find snails as well, which apparently leads to an interesting factoid where you can have snails or rosemary in a paella, but not both. Apparently Spanish snails eat rosemary or something like that. All right, the chicken's actually going to wait for a bit. Just throw a plate on top of it. And I am going to go wash up a little, and I will be right back. Be right back. Now that's hot. Now there's our onions. I want a little bit of salt. We're going to let these cook for a little while. This is just 1 onion worth. A little salt to bring out the juices so they'll cook down instead of burning. And then we'll let these go for a few minutes. And then we'll add the tomatoes. Now in the meantime, we have saffron. This is going to go into our broth. We have chicken broth over there. Now an interesting thing I've discovered is that there's a lot of debate as to whether you use broth or water. And the feeling among the water partisans is that if you use bone-in chicken, it's going to give the liquid all the same flavor that a chicken stock would. But I'm kind of in the other camp because, frankly, the broth is just what I learned to make paella with. This is cooking pretty quickly. You add the tomatoes. Now we'll just let this cook for a little while so it doesn't look quite so much like a piled pico de gallo. Seasonings in this dish are very simple. Now, while we're waiting, let me show you a few of the other ingredient. Rice. This happens to be Japanese sushi rice. You can also use arborio. The Spanish like a couple of varieties like calaspera, or actually recently in fashion is another one called bomba. Those are actually grown in and around Valencia. But whatever the case, you want to use some kind of short grain rice. You do not want to use a long grain rice because it'll be too separate. It'll be more like a pilaf than it'll really the paella you're looking for. Sofrito's coming along a little. I'm going to push all this to the side and we're going to start cooking the chicken. We put a few more coals on the fire, and as you can see, our chicken's cooked through. Gonna add some green beans. And just mix everything together. And not too much, just a pinch or so of saffron. And our chicken broth. Now we have to let this heat up a little. And there's all of our ingredients, except the rice. We're just going to wait for this to heat up. In the meantime, I'll tell you a little bit about, as I said, paella is basically an outdoor meal. traditionally eaten around a campfire or a bonfire. In fact, if you go to Spain, a lot of places actually have paella making competitions the way we have chili competitions in this country. One of the recipes I have, in fact, talks about paella as cooking for sport. It's pretty closely related to jambalaya. In fact, you could easily argue that jambalaya is, in fact, nothing more than a Louisiana version. That's coming up to heat there. It's pretty widely made. The Valencians are pretty particular about their own version, but it's very popular all over Spain. You can add shellfish. The book I first learned it from has a recipe called Paella Paellada, which was named after a Barcelona rich guy who didn't really like peeling shellfish, so everything in there was already peeled for him. The short grain rice is the important part, because short grain tends to be a little stickier. As you can see, it's a little shorter and fatter than your typical Uncle Ben's. There's more starch. In fact, I like making rice pilaf with short grain. It sounds like a contradiction because with the rice pilaf, you expect all your rice to be separate, but I don't know, I like it sticky for some reason. Now, your basic proportion here, I've got about a quart of stock and about 2 cups or about 500 grams, a little over a pound of rice. It's about a 2-to-1 thing usually. Sometimes you might need a little bit more than that. Okay, getting up there. Now we're just going to add the rice. And we are going to check back on this in about 20 minutes or so. Before we go to break, one of the most interesting setups I've ever seen. I was watching Mark Bittman's show. I think it's the best recipes in the world on PBS a couple of months ago. And he was in Spain talking to people making paella. And one of the more interesting ones was a restaurant. The stove consisted of nothing but a large concrete bench with pan supports made out of rebar. And paella cooked on an open fire, and he just had this rake he used to control the temperature. I don't think you're going to find that too much in the US. I suspect that violates a few fire codes. But that's kind of the spirit this dish was originally created in. All right, we will be back in just about 20 minutes to a half hour to check on this. You are watching Off Season. I'm Brian Connors, and if you want the recipe, you can go to our website at offseasontv.blogspot.com. We'll see you in a few. Welcome back. Our paella is ready. Please excuse my odd choice of a trivet. This has been cooking for about 20 minutes or so. Now, in Valencia, they like to put a crust on the bottom. You can see a little bit of that here. It's called a socarrat, and those who are serious paella fans love that kind of thing. Now, let's see how this came out. Wrong spoon, right? That's a nice day on the beach. Thanks for watching Off Season. I'm Brian Connors. Enjoy.